Hello and welcome everybody to episode 11 of the Casual Spikes podcast. I'm your host, Dakota, aka Crawdaddy23 here on YouTube. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Randy from Modern with Randy. Say hi, Randy.
Hi, Randy.
And we are a week removed from Pro Tour Outlaws of Thunder Junction. While it is standard, we don't normally cover standard here, but overall, I think it was a pretty cool event. Got to watch some of the matches and some pretty cool things kind of take place. And that personally, at least for me. And we're going to be going over the top 8 of the event, what decks that those players were playing. We'll throw up the placings and like the metagame, whatever. Not the metagame breakdown, the top 8 bracket, how things played out, and just kind of go overall some thoughts and opinions, and then, of course, Outlaws of Thunder Junction's impact on some of the Eternal formats that we have, because obviously in Standard it did make a pretty big difference, and
Yeah.
I would say so.
It'll probably make a bigger difference moving forward. I don't think in the Pro Tour it made a big difference. It made Boros a competitive deck and didn't really affect, I think, too much else.
I mean, you had like Esper mid range just having better, like, I guess better
Land.
mana, some better like options like the sideboard and things like that. I mean, not like it was it completely flipped the format, but I mean, I think from what you want from a set, especially with how big Standard ended up being, I think it made a pretty reasonable impact on the format.
Yeah, I think it made an impact on the format, but it wasn't anything crazy like what we've seen before with standards, where new set came in, two or three sets dropped off and like weren't playable at that time, and or like dropped out of standard, and then had to really shake the format up because we had new cards that you kind of were forced to play with. This was more just like we added better lands and a couple sideboard cards to most of like already established decks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and then some. I mean,
I,
I guess
I
I don't
also
know.
think this.
Go
I
for it.
also think this is because we had like less time in between for the Pro Tour than we normally have. So
Also very
it's
true.
hard to reinvent the wheel if we already have a good wheel.
Well, says you. I got a 3D printer and a dream. But before we get into any of that stuff, because I think for the last, I don't know, probably 2 months worth of episodes, I completely forgot to do so. Some of the advertising that I could be doing. So, if you are interested in watching future episodes of the Casual Spikes podcast, you can subscribe to my channel here, where we post all the episodes every Saturday, ideally, or most Saturdays. Talking mainly about the modern Pioneer metagame, going over the Pro Tours, things like that. Like most, if not all, things competitive Magic and things pertaining to the Pioneer and Modern format. So if that's something that's you, subscribe to this channel, so you can get episodes and ends up supporting me personally. And if you want to go and support Randy and his content and everything, his channel Modern with Randy, doing a lot of Pioneer stuff as of late, but also does like modern content as well, just getting back
Yeah,
up and going. So
I will say I think I'm going to tend to focus mostly on whatever is the current RCQ format as it goes. So it's mostly what I'm going for is just kind of to break down what's going on in the format that is currently the competitive format of choice, whether it's standard, pioneer, or modern. Um, when I started the channel originally, RCQs weren't really a big thing yet, or really a thing that people were doing, and it's finally blossomed into a real format, or like not format, but a real pathway to get into the Pro Tour, and like people are now actively going to 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 RCQs to get into that chance to get to the RC, then get further on. So now that like this has become a real thing and not just, hey guys, we made this thing that's maybe going to stick around, maybe not going to stick around. I think moving forward, like on my channel, if you want to come check it out, you'll see a lot of things that pertain to whatever the current RCQ season is going on.
you heard here first, in like 6 to 9 months, Randy is going to be an arena gamer.
No, I like my money.
Yeah, whatever. Like, sure you do. After you just bought like sweet looking brainstorms and you won't sell the kitties.
No, the kitties are playable in Legacy. Let me live my dream. Okay.
Whatever. It's like in Step Brothers, where the dad said they wanted to be a dinosaur and his dad crushed his dreams. Well, I got to be the dad in this situation. You need to stop being a dinosaur.
Listen, I get to play Legacy every time I go to an RC. So that's like if I continue to be mediocrely okay at Magic, that's at least like 3 times a year.
Flags. So, Pro Tour, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Probably didn't have any legacy there because it wasn't a convention. It was just the actual Pro Tour itself.
Yeah.
A little odd in my opinion, but go off, I guess. So we have at least I have the top 8 in order of 1 through 8. I'm sure I'm gonna throw up the graphic here in a minute to kind of show like the standings of the event, and then shortly after the bracket and everything, how it all played out. So we have, and I'm sorry if I butcher any names, because I'm sure I will. We had first place after Swiss was Yoshihiko Okawa playing Domain. We had Rai Zhang playing Four Color Legends. Takumi Matsuura playing Boros Convoke. Arn Huschenbeth playing Esper Midrange. Lucas DeChow playing Esper Midrange. Jason Yee playing Four Color Legends. Yuta Takahashi playing Blue White Control. And Sean Goddard playing Teamer Analyst. Basically, breaking it down even further, that means that there was 2 Esper midrange decks and 2 Four Color Legends decks, and then 1 copies of Azorius Control, Teamer Analyst, Boros Convoke, and the Domain deck going into the top 8.
Pretty diverse top 8, considering we saw a huge number of Esper mid-range originally being played when we looked at, the breakdown of it.
Yeah, 33% or 32% of the metagame was Esper midrange going into the event. And they had, what's that, like 25% of like the top 8. So, 31% going into the field, and then like 25% of the top 8, I would say is pretty good.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think this kind of goes more, it more showcases that Esper is just kind of like a 50-50 deck against most of the field. So if you already assume that you're a confident Magic player and good at Magic because you've gotten to the Pro Tour, it puts you in a good position to be able to kind of draw your way out in a deck that likes to draw cards.
Yeah, and thinking about it, like, because you said it earlier, like, players had less time to kind of, I guess, a metagame and try to figure out the limited plus standard format going into this event, just because they had less time with the format leading up to the Pro Tour. So I think, in those situations where you have more time, you have a lot of these other like bigger teams like Channel Fireball, Team Handshake, like this Japanese team, or I believe, with like Yuta and Akawa and like I think Ray. No, not Ray. Either way, like there was they had like a testing team in there. I don't know if they have like an official name or anything, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know they mentioned them a couple times, but I don't think they ever mentioned an official name for them.
But normally you'll see like these teams and stuff, like if they have a lot of time, like that's when you find more chances, I guess, of them like breaking the format with like a standard deck that like nobody's ever seen, or like an idea that was like tossed around but didn't really get any attention. So I think Esper midrange being the most played deck, and then you had like Convoke and I think Analyst being like the top 3. I think was just a product of like these decks were already like ABC in the format, or at least argue, whatever, like the top 2 weren't an argument, and like number 3 was between like Analyst and Domain. And with limited time to test, it was just like, okay, let's play these important matchups, let's see what's good in them, let's see what's bad in them, what we expect, and then register that deck, rather than trying to watch like a team like break the format with something that was like super innovative, kind of like what we saw at the previous Pro Tour at Murders of Karlov Manor, where Rakdos Vampires like took over. It was just a completely revamp, no pun intended, of the Rakdos mid-range deck, and just completely flipped the metagame on its head.
Yeah, I will say I think that if you're going into this Pro Tour and you're thinking about what you want to do, I'm focusing probably, I want to say at least 80% of my time on learning the metagame of limited and learning what I need to pick, what signals I need to watch out for, all the other million different questions you're asking yourself when you're playing limited. And I'm gonna go with, well, I know these couple decks were good before Thunder Junction came out, and we're getting better mana bases. So I'm just gonna play something that I know is already good, and I'm gonna spend a little bit of time, like you said, testing the matchups that I think I'm going to run into, and I'm gonna focus the majority of my time just on the limited aspect of it, so that way I know what I need to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, it's probably a good and a bad thing that at least at this point in our Magic careers, never having to plan for like a pro tour, because I feel like I would be the least prepared person in the room, knowing that like, hey, I should be doing all this stuff, and then just feeling like I have no capability of like where to start for something like that.
Yeah, I definitely can't, like you said, we can't speak from any experience, which I mean, let's be real, 90% of people who play Magic can't speak from experience of playing in a pro tour or preparing for a pro tour.
I would think
Um
even 90% would be like too low.
yeah, I could see that being more of 95% of even like, competitive Magic players, because like obviously like there's a big difference between a casual and a competitive Magic player as like
Mm.
the whole. So I mean, yeah, there's so many people who can't say they've ever prepared for a pro tour or had to do anything for a pro tour, essentially. So it's very hard to sit there and go, well, this is what I think we should do. It's very easy to sit back and like, our chairs from above and go, well, obviously, if they would have done this, that would have been a better decision. And it's like, well, that's
Mm.
great. I'm glad that you're able to look at that, a week after the pro tour and go, clearly, this is the best line.
Yeah, and I watched the finals. Like I watched it. I actually got to watch it because I had to go sleepy night times for my job while the finals was going on.
Hmm.
And there were some plays that were made in the finals by the winner of the event, which we'll talk about, later on in the show. And they made plays where like the very first like snap, like thought that had in my head was just like, why do we care about this? Like why aren't we just doing this anyway? And kind of like forcing it to happen. And
Hmm.
as the game went on, it was like, oh yeah, like it just like a turn later, it's like, okay, you know what? Like knowing that this is kind of like what is being played to, it makes total sense to do it this way rather than just forcing the issue or whatever. So I mean, we're seriously just like watching these games just are, I think, like makes you a better player as long as you can understand like what's going on. So I think it's like very important that if you are looking to get better, like watching these events and like seeing what these players do and understanding why maybe what you're going to do was the wrong thing, and why what they're doing, 4, 5, 6 turns from now is, ends up being kind of like the correct thing to do because they're able to see that far ahead.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of crazy when you sit back and watch, like the top eight even, or just the regular play. Because like obviously, the later the rounds you get, the more prolific or the better the player is going to be. Because like obviously, if you're playing in round 12, you clearly have done something right to get to round 12. You didn't go 0-3 drop. You
Mm.
know. So like I do think the more you sit back and watch like the later rounds, especially, not to dismiss anyone who was, covered on round two saying, oh, like they're a bad player. They're still in the pro tour, they're closer than I've ever been to it. And, so I can't sit there and go, oh, bad player made bad plays, because obviously they're in the pro tour. They did something right or got some amount of good luck on their side or did something to get there. They went just like win a scratch off ticket to get into the pro tour. Like they
Mm.
had to win something to get there. Um, so I do think that like you said, when you sit back and you kind of watch these players play, you can kind of see more of like the end game and like the micro game you play in Magic, where you need to figure out what your role is in the matchup and what you need to be playing towards or playing out to make sure you can close this game out as quickly as you need to or slowly as you need to win, essentially.
Oh yeah. uh One minor thing that I think we've all learned, not from just this pro tour, but from the last, I don't know how many pro tours at this point, but having a really good testing team or having a really good testing regiment goes a very long way, because there's been a lot of very good players to make top eight, or at least day two the event, and at least have like a very good deck going into the event by like their teammates just crushing, whatever the constructed format is.
Hmm.
That I mean, we might be at a point where you're not really going to. I mean, aside from what was it, the Pro Tour Lord of the Rings, where like Jake Beardsley, what ended up like winning the event, and I don't think he was really part of like a testing team, but like he was also playing probably like the best deck in the modern format as well. Not to discredit him, but you
Yeah,
know,
well, I mean, you don't you don't win by playing a bad
yeah,
deck. Like not
oh yeah,
not to dismiss anybody who plays in any capacity of Magic though. Like there's a reason why cards get chosen over other cards, decks get chosen over other decks,
mm,
and you see certain things rise to the top. Like there was a reason why Esper midrange was 30 plus percent of this metagame. It was a good deck. No one thought that was a bad deck. No one was like, "Oh,
mm.
bad deck's gonna take. I'm gonna take a bad deck to the Pro Tour."
Oh yeah, and historically speaking, in standard, it's probably more correct often than not to identify like what's the best deck in the format, and then just be really good at playing against the mirror more so than it
Mhm.
is like trying to like have an anti-meta game pick to beat what is perceived as the best deck, typically speaking.
Yeah, I would say that 90% of the time you're going into a big tournament like the Pro Tour, going to an RC, like the RC or something like that, where people are going to be on XYZ deck, right? Like if I go to like the RC, like if RC Pioneer was today, I know, you know, probably the four of the biggest decks in that room without thinking too much of it.
Hmm.
It makes way more sense to play one of those four decks and then know my mirror matchup more than it does to like, well, I'm going to play a deck that beats these four decks for sure because it doesn't exist.
Oh yeah.
Like you're not going to break that and just randomly. Like not to say that someone can't find a new deck. Obviously, new decks come about all the time, but like to sit there and just go, well, I'm just going to play. We know Esper midrange is the best deck. I'm going to play the deck that beats that for sure. Great. That's not the entire meta though.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Also, just be the best player in the room. That's the easiest way to do it.
While
Take
it's
a
out.
good deck and be the best player. So throwing up, I need to go find the like actual like bracket and everything, because like I kind of have a good idea. Like I remember for the most part like what the semifinals and everything was, but I guess as far as the matchups and stuff is like domain versus analyst, four color legends versus blue white control, Boris Convoke versus four color, and then the Esper. Oh, actually, then maybe I just know it from that. So quarterfinals, we had Yoshihiko Okawa playing against Sean Goddard in that matchup, and Domain ended up beating Teamer Analyst, which I'm kind of glad because Teamer Analyst is like I don't know. I feel like it's the unfun guy in the room, but like it does so many cool things.
It does. It's a fun deck to play though. I will say that.
So we had that matchup. So like Akawa at this point, ended up getting enough wins. Was the first person to qualify for the top 8, and is like 16-1 at this point, which is like absolutely insane for like a pro tour.
Yeah, I don't remember where he dropped his game, but I believe he dropped a game or dropped a match. I think it was in limited is where he dropped his match, but I could be wrong.
I could believe that, like five. I mean, it's 5-1 limited, and then up to this point undefeated in standard. Pretty sweet.
No, yeah, he was undefeated in standard because he had 30 points in standard.
Oh yeah,
Like
then
yeah, yeah, he dropped a game in limited. That's what it was. I don't know what's limited. Obviously, I don't know if it was in the first 3 rounds or the second set of draft, but
yeah.
he did. That's where he dropped his game. But that's honestly wild to think about. That like you took a deck that everyone knew about, right? Like this deck doesn't have anything. The only thing I had to do from the new set was rest in peace in the sideboard. So like the entire basically 75 was known going into this metagame. No one didn't discredit domain ramp. No one didn't think it was on the menu. No one didn't know about it. Like this deck was like when we go back to the RCQ season, this deck was considered the best deck to play starting out in the RCQ season, and only dropped to like second or third as an option to take to every RCQ. Like this is a deck that has been known since Standard's been around, basically. Like this is not something that like no one had on their radar, and he just took it and dominated with it.
Oh yeah. Plus, Akawa too is like a very good player. I believe that the first, like in the Pro Tours became Mythic Championships. I think that they were the runner up in Mythic Championship 1 to Autumn Burchett as well. And like that, I mean, like really kind of the birth of like Magic esports.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it was pretty neat, and I know like he'd been around like a few top eights, and I mean to this point, into the semifinals of the event, pretty cool. Just a
Yeah.
nice little tidbit of information there. Then we had Ray versus Yuta Takahashi. Four Color Legends versus Blue White Control. As much as I like to call Blue White Control the fun police, and Four Color Legends is definitely a sweet looking deck that has some pretty cool like loops and like ways to like kill their opponents and stuff. Blue White Control, put a stop to that. It's like your tournament's over here, bud.
Yeah.
From the former no, is Yuta the world? No, Yuta was a former world champion.
Yeah. Also to notate that this blue white control list played zero creatures main deck. Like
Oh
he
yeah.
had a very limited way to like his game plan was to beat down with either Restless Anchorage, which is the blue white mainland, make little infect tokens with Mirex, or beat you down with Wandering Emperor tokens.
Just very reminiscent of like the old school like blue white control decks.
Yeah, he definitely took a page out of almost reminds me of what blue white was it blue white Xion?
Yeah, yeah. Blue white Cheons.
Yeah, blue white Xion's where he just played zero creatures main deck and would win he will find a way to win. It will be slow, it will be methodical, and all your threats will be removed.
Oh yeah. I
You, you're gonna get to watch this blue white player play Magic while you pretend to play Magic.
I believe Yuta as well also played blue white control in the previous Pro Tour as well. So I mean, already had a little bit of an advantage there going into this one because he was used to registering Restless Anchorage into his deck. So
It's a good
he was
card.
like, it didn't work out the last time, but like we're gonna do it this time. It won't fail me, and didn't because then he ended up winning his quarterfinal match and going into the semifinals.
Yes.
Um, so then next we have 3 and 6 is Takumi Matsura versus Jason Yee, Boris Convoke versus Four Color Legends. So the second Four Color Legends deck, you would hope would learn from its predecessor, its brother, if you will, which makes no sense because predecessor and brother are two completely different things. But Boros Convoke kind of being the big bully, the aggro deck of choice, it seems like, and I think the best aggro deck probably moving forward in the standard metagame, if you so choose to play standard, taking down like Four Color Legends. So Boros Convoke getting to also be the fun police, but in a much more brutal way than Blue White Control.
Yeah, it turns out that Boros Convoke just needed an actual playable dual land. Who
Yeah,
knew?
which is like crazy because I would think even with like the bad mana base that it had, you still had like draws where you just like throw your hand on the table and tell your opponent to like try to beat it.
So as someone who played against this deck and played this deck a lot, um, there still were hands where that deck did that. There's also quite a few hands that you mulligan because you had no red or white mana. Like you had either all white mana, all red mana, whatever. And there was definitely times where like I was sitting as a blue white control player and my opponent's sitting there with four cards in hand. I'm like, what does he have? And like the game will end and he just like he never drew a red source or something. He's like, yeah, man, I had like four red cards in my hand just sitting in there pretending they were gonna be played.
Oh yeah,
And like it like for being a two color deck, it somehow had the most worst it had like the worst mana possible. And it didn't make sense. You're just like, I feel like if I just had put 10 mountains and 10 plains into my deck, I would have had better mana base somehow.
absolutely sickening that you have to have a limited a sealed pool like mana base for your like tier 1 standard deck, but hey, it's gotten an upgrade now. We're good to go.
Yeah, it turns out that it just needs a little inspiration or vantage point, if you will.
Just a little insight into, how how a deck can just suck if you can't cast your spells.
Yeah, guys, I don't know. This little pro tip for everyone: if you can cast your spells, you can probably win. Throw that out there.
Controversial take, but I guess I will accept it as a fact until proven otherwise. So then moving on, the last quarterfinal match, we had Arn Huschenbeth versus Lucas Duchow. The Esper midrange mirror. So unfortunately, the only other deck that put 2 copies in the top 8. I guess for one of them, great, because it's one of the. It ends up being one of the decks that gets to move on, and we just don't see all 4 of like the decks that had multiple copies put in just immediately get eliminated from the event. But with back and forth, Lucas kind of, I think it was like 3-1 in Arn's favor, and honestly, it just like didn't even feel like it was close. Like once someone resolved the dude, the 3-mana dude, I can't remember his name. Rafine. I should have just known that. It seemed like once someone like resolved Rafine and had at least like one other creature in play, it was just like it felt like it was game over. Like, all right, you have a window to like take care of this card, and if you don't take care of it, it's game over. And if I resolve one late game, it's probably game over.
Yeah.
Like absolutely disgusting. Honestly, like criminal behavior, even though it's not technically a crime. Say la vie. But that sets the stage for the semifinals, and I believe that from that the semifinals was Blue-White Control versus Boros Convoke, and then it was Domain versus Esper Midrange was the semifinals. So you had Akawa versus Arn, and kind of in the same way that I think Arn dominated his match against Lucas, it felt like Akawa just kind of had his way with Esper midrange the whole time.
Yeah, it was a 3-0 sweep.
And honestly, even when like Arn was like playing like Rafine and getting to draw 2-3 cards at a time and like get to essentially sculpt his hand against like this domain deck, it felt like it at no point did it matter. It felt like, the ninja or whoever that does like a bunch of like parkour tricks to like get up to the battle, and then he just gets punched in the face, and then like that's the fight. Like that's kind of what it felt like. Domain just like punched Arn and just punched Esper midrange like straight in the face after it just did all this parkouring to like get up to the same level, and then just like send it back down.
Look, man, I drew like 12 cards. I got like this big creature, and Domain's like, that's cool, man. Board wipe into Atraxa into, is this game over now?
Are we almost done here?
Yeah. Look, man, I gotta wrap up. I need lunch.
Yeah, it was just like it was a thrashing, to say the least. But then we had Blue-White Control versus Boros Convoke, the classic like aggro versus control matchup.
Yes.
And I think this one was also another like 3-1, I think, in Utah's favor.
Yeah, it was 3-1 and Zorius took it.
And I mean, like whatever.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that Zorius Control has a decent matchup against Boros Convoke. I say this as someone who played Azorius against Boros more than once. It is weird that like the matchup doesn't feel nearly as worrisome as you would think it would feel, being a deck that like isn't going to do a whole lot, essentially. Like, as the control deck isn't going to be doing a whole bunch, but it has just enough disruption and such to slow down Convoke. And then if you slow down Convoke just enough, you can easily stop them from just kind of taking over the game. And with his with Blue White having, 2 temporary lockdowns, 4 Wandering Emperors, and 3 Sunfalls, it kind of made it a lot easier for him. Just with 5 different board wipe spells essentially, and Wandering Emperor being able to gain life is very, it's huge. Honestly, it's kind of crazy how big the life gain is on Wandering Emperor's second ability
Oh yeah, it just
or third ability. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah, just overall, I mean, the blue white control is just, it's so annoying. It's so annoying to deal with, and I would think that a deck that would be able to go as big as what Boros Convoke can do would like really just put it on like you need to have this like right now or this is game over, and clearly it did not matter,
No, I did not.
which means that it sets the stage for the domain Yoshihiko Ikawa, who is 17-1 at this point, going, or no, 18-1, right?
He'll
With
be 18 after
15-1,
that.
no,
He's,
17 and
yeah,
1 going into the last round. 12-0 in standard. Go up against former world champion Yuta Takahashi playing blue white control. And honestly, like the games were a lot of fun to watch. Like watching these
they,
two players play.
they were a lot of fun to watch, but it definitely did. It definitely felt that like whatever decision Blue White Control made, it didn't matter.
Yeah, the the amount of life that Domain was able to gain, I was like, if Blue White Control somehow wins this game, like even though it's an untimed match, we're gonna hit time.
Yeah,
If Blue White somehow wins.
I do think that um, the Blue White Control deck was not designed to beat the Domain Ramp deck. So in my experience, as a Blue White Control player, if you're playing Jace the Perfected, the one that gets the mill out, that's your best way to beat the Domain Ramp deck as Blue White Control. And um, they were running 0 copies of that, and that's really like your big takeaway of how to beat Domain Ramp. Like it's a combination of like that Planeswalker and then just drawing a bunch of board wipes and removal spells that don't matter against you. And if your opponent doesn't draw horribly and you don't have a way to like end the game quickly, it doesn't matter for the blue white player. Like they can make the correct line every time and they're still probably going to lose. And I think that's kind of what we saw with the finals.
And in that game one of the finals, where you said that Yuta was playing like 3 or 4 copies of the Wandering Emperor in his list.
4 copies.
4 copies. So for those of you that don't know, the I would say like kind of the big threats, like the cards that you I think absolutely want is like the domain deck are Atraxa and the Topiary Stomper, and
Yes.
they each have a keyword on them that is super awkward for the Wandering Emperor, and that's vigilance.
Yeah. I will say the first time I played against Stomper and had learned it had Vigilant when it attacked, I was like, what is this BS?
Hey, good magic card's good. Don't hate the player, hit the game.
I was like, this is a green card. Why does it say Vigilance?
And you know what? This did come up in like game one, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, where Yuta had an angel, I believe it's like Angel Despair, the one that you kick and it deals 2 damage to any target.
Archangel of Wrath.
Archangel of Wrath, yeah, that's that one. I think Archangel Despair is the one that blows up permanents.
Yeah, it's like the triple white, triple black, two generic flying 5/5.
Close enough. Same thing.
I only know that because of Legacy.
Hey, in the rare case, like Archangel of Wrath, like it ends up being an Angel of Despair in a way. Sure.
Moving on.
But so uh Ikawa had I believe it was either a Stomper and it was either an Atraxa and a Stomper with an Archangel of Wrath in play. It was like one of the two Vigilance things, and he was only attacking with the Vigilance creature. And the whole time, Yuta's staring at a Wandering Emperor in hand, and Akawa has enough Archangel of Wraths in the deck to be able to burn out Yuta. And if he ends up attacking with that Archangel, obviously then Yuta ends up gaining 2 more life, which means that, casting uncounterable Archangel of Wraths then does not kill him, which means that he has to be able to connect with another creature to be able to try to win the game. So you actually watch game 1 and you'll see, from whatever turn onward, Akawa only attacks with creatures with Vigilance to avoid getting the Wandering Emperor to exile something to end up gaining life.
Yeah, it's a very heads up play from him to not like, I mean, obviously you expect someone who's undefeated in the tournament, or undefeated in the standard portion of the tournament, to kind of understand the deck and the metagame enough to understand this. But it is a very heads up thing to notate that you don't ever want to attack with your creatures that don't have vigilance, because it does so much more. It sets you back more than it does help you.
Oh yeah, just something in like that situation. I mean, think about it. You've played already 2 matches of like high level Magic today. You've been playing like all weekend. You think all the testing and stuff you did, mentally at that point, you, for like most of us, basically checked out at that point. Like you're just kind of on autopilot, like take game actions. The fact that like in that moment, and like probably arguably one of the most important matches of Magic that you'll end up playing, very few that would matter more than that. And you're just like, I'm going to play around this card at a time where, maybe it doesn't matter, but there's the potential that with enough things happening in the right sequence, I could win the game because my opponent never gets an opportunity to essentially gain life and remove a creature with their Wandering Emperor. And that's exactly what happened in that first game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like a product of, like, again, watching some of the best players in the world who obviously know their deck, knows what's going on, and just being able to execute that. And that's like one of the best ways of like seeing something like that, recognizing that's the thing that's going to happen, and then actually seeing that come to fruition, rather than, this is kind of what they're playing towards and it ended up being like the wrong decision. It's just something that, is like a good example of kind of like leveling up in a way as like a Magic player, is like actually being able to make that read and, kind of commit to it and then play to it.
Yeah, it is something that, like, it's one of these things where like you have to kind of mentally be ready and be prepared for all these little micro decisions that you don't think adds up or matters, but they will give you, like, doing that gave him probably like 0.25% of a percentage point towards helping him win. And when you make all these little micro decisions that continuously add up, where you got like 0.25% here, you got like 0.15% here, 0.05% here, it all adds up to ultimately helping you. Like, it's very easy and obvious, like, to figure out like the obvious plays that are good. Like, people know, like, okay, my opponent's tapped out, and they don't have enough blockers, I can attack for lethal. I should make the attack. Obvious play is obvious. But it's these little micro decisions that people don't understand adds up. And it's through testing and through continuous play that you understand and learn these. And by watching better players, there's always so much you can figure out on your own. And like, as someone, like, if you want to get better in Magic, or you want to get better in general, like, you need to be watching players who are better than you. You need to kind of understand the theory of Magic, if you will, and understand the thought process of what goes on and why people make that decision, or why they're making that decision, or like, sit there and try to figure out, okay, well, like, if you were in this position, like, what decision would you have made? And then, figure out, like, well, why was your decision not right? Or why was maybe you sat there and watched the final and like, oh, I would make this decision, and go, okay, well, that was correct, but why was it correct? Like, you need to understand you need to understand the thought process behind it, besides just like, well, I picked D on multiple choice, and that turned out to be right.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like these are some of the best players in the world too. Like playing, it's like if you want to get to that level, if you aspire to get to that point, that's that's kind of the level you have to be at, and then being able to play at that level like at all times, not having like one of those like a blind squirrel is right twice a day or once a day, whatever it is, or I guess a broken clock's right twice. Either way, like whatever
The
the
broken
adage
clock
is,
is right twice a day.
every once in a while, a blind squirrel finds a nut. Like
Yeah, that's the other one.
yeah, well, a broken squirrel finds the clock. That's all I took from it. But like, that's kind of where you need to be at, and where you need to consistently play at to kind of be at the point where you can reach that level. Of course, some luck involved, of course, but aside from that, like Ikawa kind of took away like any of the luck or anything that Yuta could possibly have to beat what was going on. It was like, you're gonna need to like draw pretty insane if I take this line for you to beat me, and he didn't. He stuck to what his game plan was, and he ended up winning the game off of that like decision, repeatedly to not attack with that creature. So
Yeah,
pretty cool stuff.
yeah. He basically just used his Archangels of Wrath as like 7 mana deal 4 damage.
Yep, and +1 power and toughness to Yuta's Phyrexian tokens. Just something to keep in mind. That is true.
But it was a very interesting top 8. I also kind of want to notate that this Japanese team managed to take managed to outside of I think one of their teammates was the only one who didn't make day 2. He scrubbed out. I think he just did poorly in draft, which I mean, it's gonna happen, right? Like at the end of the first drafting, someone's gonna be 3-0, someone's gonna be 0-3. It's just how mathematically it's gonna work out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of their teammates did poorly in his draft pod, and then I think he scrubbed out in like the first 2 games and just kind of dropped out. But I believe everyone from this Japanese team made day 2, and then they put 3 players into the top 8, and 3 of those players were first, second, and third.
Pretty good.
Also, another like crazy fact: the Japanese players in the top 8 only lost to themselves.
That sounds about right. I believe that.
Yeah, so you had domain ramp that didn't obviously lose at all. You had blue white that beat the 4 color legends that wasn't from any team. It wasn't from Japan or wasn't on the Japan team. You had the Boros Convoke that beat the other 4 color legends that wasn't on the Japan team. You then had the 2 Japan players, Boros Convoke and Azorius Control. Obviously, one of them has to lose,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the finals, you had the same thing happen. One of them had to lose. So it's wild that not only did this team that's essentially relatively unknown. They weren't a team coming into this event that people thought of, like Team Handshake and the other ones I can't think of. Um, they weren't a team that anyone really knew about or thought about, and they managed to put in 3 into the top 8, get first, second, and third, and only lose to themselves in the top 8.
I would say I would call that a pretty successful pro tour in my book.
Yeah, I mean that is almost unheard of. It is, and what's even crazier though is like usually when you see something like this happen, it's when a team broke the format, right? Like we saw this in the last pro tour when vampires broke the format. All their players were on different decks. Like obviously they had more than like some people were playing. There's a couple people on Boros Convoke. There's a couple people on Blue Light Control. A couple people on 4 color legends. It wasn't like they were all on each person was on one individual deck. But you look at the top 8; they all 3 of them were on different decks. It's not like they broke the format. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense on why they were all in the top 8. They broke the format. They found the deck that no one saw. Nope, they just played 3 good decks.
Yeah, I think something that we really haven't seen in a while is everyone playing different decks. There wasn't a consensus, and not only that, but I mean, all 3 of them took the 3 highest places that they could possibly take. And even like the last Pro Tour where we saw like Team Channel Fireball come up with like Rakdos Vampires. I mean, they put 2 copies in the top 8, but one of them won the event and the other person got knocked out in the quarterfinals. You know, they didn't. It's not like they both made the finals or anything either. So it's,
Yeah.
I mean, they crushed it. They absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, it would be fair to say that Japan has found a team to put up numbers.
Yeah, and it's only remains to be seen. I'm sure after all the result, you know, this kind of result, that like they're probably all going to start testing together if they weren't already testing with each other previously before this event. I'm sure going forward, it's going to be kind of like that core of players going forward.
They will be a threat in the next Pro Tour. I would not be surprised if, much like how we talk about like Team Channel Fireball, Team Handshake, things like that, they will also be talking about whatever the Japanese team decides to name themselves.
As a side note to this, before we kind of get to the good and bad of like the Pro Tour, I kind of wish that they would bring back kind of like the team aspect of like the Pro Tour, where you kind of
Yeah.
had like a team of like 6 players or however many, and then the team as a whole got points based on how well players did, and have like some kind of maybe some kind of event at the end of the year, something like fun or whatever, something just to kind of make the players a little bit more recognizable and kind of put like faces to names, or you know, whatever, make it a little bit easier.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree with that. I did like that when they originally had done that, and we saw like the excuse me, then we had like the bunch of different like smaller teams where you had people break off into smaller teams, and they did kind of like almost a reality show too about like the different teams and their testing, that they would go get a house together and test before the pro tour a week out and whatever. And it was interesting. It was fun to see that. It made it feel almost more personal, like you were part of the pro tour as you were sitting there watching it, because obviously only so many people get invited to the pro tour, or should I say get invited, but earn an invite to the pro tour, things like that. So it's kind of fun when they make it feel like you're part of that experience.
oh yeah, and being able to see the hard work and stuff like the teams and the players like put into, you know, preparing for it, and kind of like that collective hive mind, you know,
Hmm.
really just like wanting to be in that environment is something that I would want to be in, just because like the, if anything, you know, obviously you're prepared, but like the camaraderie of like just a bunch of people coming together for something like this, and even though it's like not necessarily a team thing, you know, it is a team thing at the end of the day, just to make sure that like everyone in the group performs to the best of their abilities, and you know, playing their part to make sure that something like that happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it is called Magic the Gathering. It is a gathering of people. Like, obviously, like you and I have been to multiple tournaments through our lives and things like that, and I will say that I've had more fun when I'm at a tournament with someone that I can talk to after each round, or have a friend with me, or a couple friends with me, than I am if I'm going to a tournament and just crushing it. Like, it's not fun to be at a tournament by yourself, essentially.
Mm. Yeah, I would probably rather go to like a tournament in person and interact with like the people and everything, and do
Mhm.
bad, you know, by my standards, do bad in the event, rather than like be at home and play a tournament online, and especially like do bad, but like even perform like reasonably well, like top 16 something. You know, I think I would rather just be in the environment of being around people and like playing and being able to interact with other humans, rather than just sitting at a computer.
Yeah.
um, but you know, so that's essentially like the wrap up of the pro tour. You know, like we, Domain won the event 18-1
Yeah.
over the course of the weekend, 5-1 in a construct, or in a limited, excuse me, and then you know, undefeated. That make it like 13-0 in
Yeah. They're hanging out.
constructed.
Yep.
Absolutely insane run. I think probably only like 2 or 3 buys too. So I mean, like played 10 matches, won 10 of them. Pretty damn good.
Yeah. Like he was the first player into the top 8, so I think the last 2 rounds he didn't have to play. Which I mean, he was undefeated. Like basically undefeated. Like it's really hard to say, oh, he should have had to play the last 2 rounds. Like why? So he could just double draw in.
Hmm.
Like he was getting into the top 8 no matter what. It just all that was going to change was his seeding.
Oh yeah, Akawa was not being denied, and he even it was even talked about like in the booth too that he said that every time he makes the top eight, he feels like he gets better as a player, and he's gonna go and he's going to perform better. And like I said earlier, you know, he was the runner up in Mythic Championship 1. You know, back when the Pro Tours became Mythic Championships, lost on Autumn Burchett in that standard environment. You know, playing the Esper control deck, so kind of cool that you know we go back to like the Pro Tour, you know, we have, you know, standard here, you know, the biggest standard, you know, in terms of the number of legal sets available in the format. And
Yeah,
Ikawa like goes in, like absolutely just crushes everybody that is just standing in his path to victory, and then just claims it, you know, emphatically over, you know, a former world champion in Yuta Takahashi.
yeah. He went out and he proved that he is an amazing Magic player, and he knew what he was doing. He had tested well. He had chosen, one of the better position decks for this tournament, and he did what you want to do. He did, what everyone wants to do when you go to a Pro Tour. He went essentially undefeated, dropping one match the entire tournament, and yeah, proved that he is an amazing Magic player.
Only only very minusculely could his tournament have gone better.
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
very like the 99.9% of like if you could have a pro tour go anyway, like that's how it would have been.
yeah. No one's gonna be upset that, oh man, I dropped a match.
True. I won the event and only dropped a match. That would be a flex.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Uh,
it's very impressive.
the good Randy. I'm still convinced that Outlaws of Thunder Junction Limited is probably one of the best limited formats that we've seen in a while from like a standard set.
I would say so. I'm. This is um a set that I've been happy with. Limited wise, it's a set I've been happy with. As far as what's done constructed wise, for the non-repeating formats, Pioneer and Modern, and it's very fun overall, and it feels swingy and not swingy at the same time. If anyone wants to make sense of that, they can. But it feels both that you don't need to. It's not that you need to open up the mythic bomb to be able to like just crush someone. But also feels like you can open up you still have the ability to open up those bombs and crush someone, but it doesn't feel like it's very one-sided, right? Like you're not seeing against everyone who opened a Jite and everyone who didn't open a Jite in the sense like it is a very cohesive format.
Oh yeah, the draft, the draft version of limited, the sealed deck, everything like that. I've fallen in love with it. I used to draft religiously back in like the late 2010s, like around like the Ravnica and War of the Spark, stuff like that, and OTJ just kind of gives me that same like feeling of just like I cannot wait to go back on Wednesday at 6 o'clock to my LGS and sit down with a bunch of other people and like draft this set. And that's what I want to do is like draft the set constantly. So I think it's been an absolute home run for me personally.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Um, Related to the constructed portion of the Pro Tour, I mean, honestly, I made a very diverse metagame, 6 different decks in the top 8, and aside from like the polarizing amount of decks for Esper mid range, there were a decent amount of decks that had double digit numbers in the event, and it didn't feel like it was Esper mid range like everywhere, and then everyone else kind of fighting for their lives. It felt like a very balanced metagame, even if the numbers on paper didn't suggest that.
Yeah, it was fun to see. It wasn't just watching mirrors all day long.
So I mean, overall, I mean to me, that makes it a pretty good pro tour. Like the only way it could have been better is if it was modern or pioneer, like a format that like I actively had more knowledge and cared about like going into the event than I did for standard. But that's not really a
Yeah.
knock on it. That's more of, I guess, a knock on like my knowledge of the standard format.
Yeah, I think it's more a knock on the fact of like I think it's more a knock as a whole on the fact that like standards only important when it's RCQ season, right? Like people like as a whole, people enjoy playing Pioneer and Modern more than they do Standard. So people aren't casually like people aren't casually playing Standard. Usually at their um, local game stores, things like that, they're playing Pioneer, Modern, Commander, things like that. So they're not tuned in, I think, a lot to Standard. And if you don't have a tournament or a reason to play Standard, you're not playing Standard. So I think it's more a dig at Magic for not having people have a reason to care about Standard enough, I think.
And I mean, up to the not really, I guess not up to this point, but for a while, and I mean a long time, and then thanks to COVID and everything,
Yeah.
Standard was just kind of like whatever. It felt like it was swingy, crazy, like broken. Like there's very clearly the best deck, and then even the deck that's made to beat the best deck doesn't consistently beat the best deck. It
Hmm.
it definitely soured like my taste for playing Standard, and then even kind of like wary of really getting into it and anything like that for the Pro Tour or for even the RCQ season. And this Pro Tour kind of showed me that like, hey, Standard's in a pretty good spot, and with rotation coming up too, it's definitely worth maybe dusting off the Arena account and playing some Standard, or like trying to learn the Standard metagame to kind of play in that environment.
Yeah, Standard feels like it's in the healthiest it's been in a while. That's actually the only reason why I played in the RCQ season is I had a friend who had said, no, 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 Standard actually feels healthy and diverse. It's not, um, black insert your other color deck is the best deck in the format and nothing else matters. It's, you can play one, two, three, four, five, six different decks and take down a tournament. And that's definitely how it feels as it stands currently. I mean, look at the top eight. We had no more than two of any kind of deck in the top eight.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say it definitely feels a lot better than it has in a long time. And maybe this will get people more into standard. Maybe it won't. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that like I'm gonna be care more about standard because I won't. But I currently as it stands, I just chase whatever is the next RCQ season. Because I like playing competitive Magic. So there's no reason for me to super hyper focus on standard because I'm not queued for that Dallas RC because I didn't play well enough uh, to get into it, as well as just so I don't have a need reason to focus on standard. So I'm going to focus on Pioneer because that's the RCQ season as it stands now.
No, that's fair. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the good from the event, I would say. I mean, there's obviously some other stuff, but I think that's kind of like the more important takeaways. Like the limited format was great. The constructed format ended up being a lot better than what it was anticipated to be. And
Mhm.
I think going forward, standard Pro Tours are going to be, at least to me, a little bit more interesting, and definitely willing to look a little bit deeper into some of the new sets that come out to kind of explore those limited formats as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in keeping up with the limited format, seeing what happens and such like that. But we'll have to see, how Wizards curate standard essentially and what happens next with the next standard set.
Amen. So that's good. What about the bad? Randy, I'm going to let you start with your, I would say, semi controversial take.
Yeah, I think you said it best when we were talking about it before the show or before the podcast. That it did kind of feel rushed with the um, coverage of it and with like them talking through the matches and stuff like that. It didn't feel like the best that I've seen before and what I've seen from previous streams and tournaments and stuff. It did kind of feel just like the casting of it wasn't what I've grown accustomed to. I could be in the minority of this. I'm not saying that I am the end all be all when it comes to that. People I'm sure will disagree. If you do, let me know down in the comments why I'm wrong. Um, but I do think that is one of my takeaways from like the negative of it, essentially.
And yeah, like the fact that the top eight. I mean, we used to, day three of the event was just as long as day one and day two, where
Hmm.
literally we watched every single match start to end, you know, and it's not like any other matches were going on as like the one being shown on camera. It was literally quarterfinal one, two, three, four, semifinal one, two, finals. So
Yeah.
and you can kind of tell because they would play, their feature match, and then they would hurry up and rush through, like one game from one of the other ones, which is fine. Understand players probably want to go home. Production crew, we can have a 3 to 4 hour event by doing it this way rather than an 8-9 hour event doing it the other way. But for the fact that I want to see as much magic as possible, and I want to see, like everything kind of happen, like the little kid in me. I
Hmm.
want to see everything happen. I would much prefer it, if it was back to the old way. But I also understand for, the viewer's sake, probably doing it this way is the better way of doing it.
Yeah, I won't sit here and pretend that like this is the best way to do it or not the best way to do it, and I won't sit here and pretend that like I don't know what I don't know how long it takes them to tear down and put everything away because obviously, once the cameras turn off, it's not like, all right, guys, go home, we're done. Like you have to tear down everything, you have to pack everything away, you have to do X, Y, Z, whatever, they have to do to get that all set up and done. So I won't sit here and pretend that like, well, no, man, you should do it my way because I matter more than, the hundreds of people and thousands of hours that go into making the Pro Tour the Pro Tour. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm more important than anyone else sitting there. But I do miss that when you go back and you watch the old Pro Tours from even, a couple of years ago, like basically pre-COVID, I would say, where you can sit there and they go, like you said, they go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, and you watch every match is start to finish. I do miss that. I like that personally.
Yeah, it's and that was one of the bad, and I should have just lumped it in with that, but that was kind of like my own point. It was just that we didn't get to see the full, seven matches or whatever from the top eight and everything, which
Mhm.
again to me a little unfortunate, but I understand that probably for the majority of people, involved with coverage and then also just kind of like watching at home, it's probably the best thing going forward. I just don't like it
Yeah,
personally.
agreed. I don't like it, but like I said, I'm not going to sit here and dictate and say that my time's more important than someone else's.
True. Actually, I would probably means that I would value my time less than anybody else because I would literally just I'm gonna stay at home, watch
Yeah.
8-9 hours of Magic, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm gonna be happy about it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We probably value our time less in that sense. But yeah. Um,
Go off,
but
I
yeah, I'm not gonna
guess.
sit here and say that like, they deserve to stay longer than they need to.
Uh, the last thing that I had, mana costing ward kind of sucks, and by that I mean uh, we know that, and a lot of the played creatures in Magic currently either have a ward of sacrificing creature in terms of like Vein Ripper, Ping Life in Amalia, and things like that. And watching people play Rafine and Ward One is literally like that's the least amount of mana that you have to pay to like not have your spell countered by ward, and it was just so annoying every match, just watching someone like pay the one and then just like, oh, your spell's getting countered or anything like that, and just watching like how bad the curve gets when
Yeah,
it,
it's kind of unreal how much it can fuck with you.
and the I think ward like overall honestly is a lot better than like hexproof because like you at least get a chance to do something about the thing that's hitting you. I just now
Mhm.
I'm not sure if sack a creature or paying life is better, or if paying extra mana for your spell to like try to kill something or do something to something is better than, paying life or sacking a creature or doing something else other than paying mana.
Yeah, I think it's all dependent on the format and what you're doing, essentially. Or excuse me, not the what you're doing, but like it depends on the deck, right? So like in blue white control, paying the extra one is not nearly as devastating as trying to sacrifice a creature that you don't have.
Right.
So I think it's a lot of give and take. It depends on like what you expect to see and what you are expecting to do. But even sacrificing a creature we have seen is clearly a challenge for a lot of decks. If you look at Pioneer and how good Red Black Vampires is.
Right. Or even how good Amali is by paying life. Because
Yes,
sometimes
because
it
you're
just
still
doesn't
beating
matter.
down with your little X ones.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah, I don't know. Like, Ward, I think, is like a pretty good fix for something like Hexproof or Shroud or whatever. Just
Hmm.
turns out anything that has Ward on it is just super annoying to deal with, period.
Yeah, it's kind of unreal.
Like, so should it exist? I don't know, but I'm going to continue to yell at Clouds about it.
I mean, that's what I do.
So, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly of the Pro Tour, the top eight, and everything like that. Overall, I've said it, a million times because of my ADHD and probably the slight autism, but like overall, great event. Can't
Yeah,
complain.
I was happy with it overall. I was happy to see what happened. The top eight was still good. It was interesting to see everything that was played and seeing a whole bunch of different decks and such. I look forward to seeing what we see in the coming Pro Tour, seeing what changes, things like that.
Oh yeah, and you know what? It wouldn't be Outlaws at the Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And we talked about how like really a lot of like the mana bases got upgraded, some sideboard pieces, but there really wasn't a lot of like main deck things, like spells or whatever, getting played in like the main deck of some of these, or I guess some of these decks, whatever you want to call them. Uh,
Mhm.
Outlaws of Thunder Junction, between the actual set, like the vaulted, whatever the vault set is that's also in it.
Yeah, the extra set.
Yeah, have been making they definitely have been making an impact. Some of them a lot bigger than others, but some of them kind of reinventing themselves and like finding ways to slot into some classic archetypes in the Pioneer modern format. And Randy, the first one I have on here is like one that I know you're a pretty big fan of. I like his hat, but that's about it.
Oh, Slick Shot.
Yeah.
He's great. Um, Slickshot has done a lot in the fact of just just the fact I think alone that it has brought in yeah, Jesus, can't think of anything today. It has brought an aggro back to Pioneer. And I think that is honestly huge. Um, Realistically, Amalia had pushed out aggro, in my opinion, to the point of like we had seen, basically it was Rakdos Vampires, Amalia, and Arclight Phoenix as kind of like the three decks if you're gonna play. Like if you want to play in this format, you're choosing A, B, or C, and you're learning how to beat, B and C, or you're learning how to beat A and C. Um, And with Slickshot, we've seen we have a Gruul aggro deck. We have Red Deck Wins is back up on the menu. We have um, Heroic is doing well. It was doing okay already before this because of its Amalia a matchup, but like it's doing even better now because it got a strict upgrade in its 2-drop slot that can also just be plotted away to hide it from removal spells and or discard spells. So I mean we have three aggro decks now that are showing up and doing well um, in this format. We've heard that if you want to win RCQ, I know multiple streamers and pro players have basically said you need to be registering Slitshot. I don't think that we're in like any kind of dire straits, right? Like we're not like looking at a position where like oh Slitshot warped the meta game, but it has made it to where like aggro like if you take an aggro deck, you're not gonna get laughed out of your tournament walking into it. You have a legitimate shot to just like take down this tournament.
Oh yeah, and the output, the damage output that Slickshot has, like the fact of it all kind of came together in like this perfect storm to kind of like, hey, even though you're basically playing an aggro deck centered around probably like the same 20-ish, 20, 30-ish cards. It is viable, and you can kind of add, whatever you think it is missing. If you don't
Mhm.
want to play mono red, you have white for, you can play some of the protection stuff, some of the extra burn spells and stuff that are really impactful. You have the green to kind of help you force through damage, or even just kind of like protect your things, protect your slick shot, what have you, because eventually it will just win the game on its own. So,
Yeah.
I mean, really, you kind of have multiple flavors of slick shot in Pioneer, and all of them are very viable. And as long as you, I guess, pick your reason as to why you are playing the extra color that you are playing, I don't think you can really go wrong playing it.
No, not at all. I definitely think that it is. It's very easy to play basically any color besides blue with Slick Shot is probably like perfectly acceptable.
That's true. Instead of
And
casting like
then
15 cantrips to kill your opponent, you can just cast like three burn spells and or pump spells and end the game.
yeah, basically, like it turns out that like just killing them is a lot better. Who knew?
I mean, hey, I am a big fan of casting Opt, Consider, and Sleight of Hand. I will say that, but it does not do a very good job at killing your opponent.
Have you heard of Phoenix?
Yeah, I'm still not doing that. I would rather play with a bird wizard than an elemental bird.
That's fair. That is the biggest challenge I have moving forward with my RCQ I'm going to go to here next weekend is whether or not I want to register bird wizards or just birds.
Man. Honestly, I mean, as like a quick aside from this and whatnot, we can move on. I would think, at least in a theoretical sense, that Arclight Phoenix would be semi-favored against the slick shot, for the fact that like its toughness doesn't get pumped unless you're playing specifically like the green version.
Yeah, so I mean, like the problem is I do kind of like Arclight Phoenix over the. I mean, I like Arclight Phoenix just because the reason why Arclight Phoenix is so good is you churn through so much of your deck, you see so much of the cards, like you can pretty much find whatever answer you need to find.
Mm-hmm.
And with Arclight Phoenix being, you get to see like I almost every game I play with Arclight Phoenix, I'm seeing probably 30 plus cards a game. So it's very hard not to find what I'm looking for. And I think it's just better overall. I do think that the aggro deck is good. I won't fault anyone for playing the aggro deck. I don't think it's a bad choice to play the aggro deck. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing the aggro deck. But I do think that in a general open field, I think Arclight Phoenix is probably a better choice. I mean, we've kind of seen that overall, where like it still demands 13% of the meta. It's still doing well. It's not like Arclight Phoenix isn't going anywhere. Like this rule aggro isn't usurping Arclight Phoenix by any means. But I do think that it's probably a better choice to play Arclight Phoenix. I also think that like it's very easy to play the aggro deck and just 5-0, 10-0 into a top 8 without trying too hard. But
Oh yeah,
um
yeah. I mean, maybe apples to oranges, but I feel like if you want to try to beat those decks, I mean, even though I've seen Arclight Phoenix also get like smacked by like the different versions of like Slick Shot, I would also still, even though I've seen it, just like a deck that has like 3 damage spells for like 1 mana and 5 damage spells for 1 mana, and kind of doesn't care about two froning themselves to kill like an important threat, that
mhm.
it would probably line up still like fairly well against like that deck, and then obviously the rest of the metagame as well.
I think that I have a controversial take where I think that if you want to play um a Slickshot deck, I think you want to play the like Wizards version of it that has the heavy burn, because there's so many decks that don't have life gain in this format right now, and like it's very easy to do still the same amount of burst damage with just playing some spells that you're already going to be playing with your creatures, and like the Arclight Phoenix doesn't ever gain life, and like that's your easiest way to beat them is that like you just get them down to like sub 5 life, And like, all right, cool. They have 4 Arctic Phoenixes. I can never attack again. I like to draw my burn spell. I like to play my burn spell. I like to play my burn spell. Are you dead yet? Like,
Is this game over?
yeah. I would like to play my 3 mana, three 3 mana bolt. Does that resolve? Oh, it does? Cool. You're at 2. I would like to play another 3 mana bolt next turn. Are you dead?
Yeah, I would say like overall, whether you decide you want to play more like 1 mana 3 damage burn spells, you want to play more of like pump spells, you want to be slightly more reactive, like trying to protect your pieces while still being able to throw a little bit of burn or a little bit of pump out there. Whatever version you decide to play, Slick Shot is, at least for the time being, is here to stay.
Yeah, I definitely see this as being a big contender moving forward. It's also a relatively cheap deck. Well,
It's a
I say
very cheap
relatively,
deck.
it is and it isn't. So I mean, like it still costs money. It's not just free. Like obviously we have Slick Shot still being worth some amount of money. Um, but I mean, like if you're looking at like the red green deck version, like Play with Fire and Monstrous Rage still are relatively expensive as a whole. I think Play with Fires are still $2 to $3 a piece. Same with Monstrous Rage. And that's going to be played whether you play the red, the green, whatever color deck you're playing. And then obviously Slick Shots, I think, are still like 15, 16 a piece.
I mean, like
And
overall
stuff
though,
like
like aside from
it's
like
still
Slick Shots, Mono Red should be like under $100, right?
um
Something like
yeah,
that.
give or take. Excuse me, give me 1 second. I can tell you for sure.
Hey, Jamie, can you pull that up, please?
Yeah. So Mono Red, according to MTG Goldfish, is at $176.
Okay, so it's probably just over $100 then, like minus the Slick Shots.
Yeah, so they got Slick Shots being $62 of that.
It's like 115 or like whatever.
Okay, so this one,
114.
hang on, let me see. Can we find a better version? Because this one's playing Chandra Dress to Kill, and like most of the decks are not playing that.
True, but that's a pretty spicy card to have.
Yeah, I've toyed around with that card. It's not too terrible, but like, yeah. So you got Slick Shots at like $62, and your next most expensive cards are Play with Fire, Monsters Rage at like a 17 for a playset and $12 for a playset, respectively.
Oh yeah,
And your Den of the Bugbears are like 14 for a playset, which that seems a little high.
yeah, like $4 per
Yeah.
copy.
And then sideboard is where your money is again, with Rampaging Ferocidon being 36 for a playset and Running Volleys being $6 for 3, which I mean like $2 a piece. But like if you're just trying to like minimize, like costs overall, like if you have like Slick Shots are worth the money. This card's going to probably be a $15 card, I think, for the next foreseeable future, unless it somehow gets printed to oblivion, which I don't see that happening anytime soon. It has a relevant mechanic that is, you know, only been in one set so far. So unless plot decides to become like a reoccurring mechanic, it's not going to really show up in any other sets coming up anytime soon. It's a great card in Modern and Pioneer. Like, it's something I think that is worth investing in. I'm not going to say that we're no financial stream by any stretch of the imagination. And also, do remember that Magic is not like necessarily an investment. It's a cost to play the game. So I mean, if you are trying to invest in Magic, this is not the stream for you. First off, and second off, you should be doing much different things than what we're telling you to do.
Oh yeah, amen, amen to that.
But
I mean,
but yeah, it's a good deck
yeah,
and it's cheap.
a cheap deck that is pretty easy to play. Some nuances. I had someone in my comment section ask me what deck they would recommend for if they were starting to play the Pioneer deck, and I said just this one, just because it's like the mono red version, straightforward. Like you could play it where you're just like, I'm gonna play all my spells like pre-combat, and like yeah, there's sometimes where you're gonna be punished doing it, but there's other times where I mean you're just gonna end up winning the game where your opponent's like, that's a mistake, but like I couldn't do anything about it, because like most decks end up not being able to do anything about it. So
Yeah, I mean, like, so the only way you really get punished for that is if they have like the removal spells to remove all your creatures already, so you're not getting that additional damage in. But at the same time, like if they had their removal spells, you weren't going to beat that anyway with mono red. Like none of your spells say protect this creature.
Oh yeah,
So like, oh no, they had like they had their removal spells, but like you definitely have enough damage where you can get early chip damage in pretty easily, and then just take over the game with your burn.
true. Learn when to cast your monstrous rages. Learn when you should burn their creatures or burn the face, and like you're already like 85 to like 90% of the way to like just winning more games than maybe not more than you should, but just being able to like win games that you wouldn't have before by just playing all your things pre-combat and then going into the attack step.
Yeah,
But either way, like you could probably play either way and still win a lot more games than most other decks typically would by having like that same strategy.
yeah. It is. For lack of better words, it is a simple-minded deck that will win a lot of games without you doing too much thought process. By no means do I think that aggro decks are brain dead or they're super easy to play, because people will always like, oh, well, aggro is just easy. Tap land, cast spell, attack. Like, well, yeah, but I mean, you can limit that to a lot of decks that are not nearly as simple. Like, the deck is relatively simple-minded in the sense of like it is a kind of a straightforward gameplay. And you're playing to take them from 20 to 0 in the fastest way possible.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean that you are just throwing every spell face and attacking into obviously bad attacks. There is a lot more nuance to it than just turn card sideways.
Oh yeah, but hey, Slickshot made it cool to do that now.
Yes, it did. I have enjoyed Slickshot, and I've enjoyed the leagues I've played with Slickshot for sure.
So moving on, we've stroked the bird wizard's hat and ego enough. Just
Also, he is playable in Modern too.
yeah, he made the prowess deck like pretty. I mean,
Oh my god,
a pretty
he's
sweet
so
deck to play.
he's so broken in Prowess and Modern because you have free spells.
Yeah, that I can confirm.
Yeah,
So
we once again figured out free spells are good.
turns out Phyrexian mana was a mistake. Way back when.
Who knew?
So next, I would say probably the next biggest impact on a format being a Simulacrum Synthesizer, the 3-cost artifact that gets to trigger off itself. So it's a 3-mana artifact, 2 generic and a blue. It enters the battlefield, you scry 2, and then whenever an artifact with converted mana cost 3 or greater enters the battlefield, you get to make a construct that has +1/+1 for for each artifact that you control.
Notably, it does say whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater.
Is
It
another? Oh
doesn't
yeah, because
trigger.
it doesn't
Yeah,
trigger itself. Yeah.
yeah. So if you play a second one, it's not going to trigger itself, but you will get the scry again. And then if you play a creature or another spell that's 3 or greater, it will trigger twice, obviously. But yeah, it does say another. Magic Magic was careful enough to word another into that.
And I guess it wouldn't be so. I don't know. Maybe it would be like too good if it was like 3 mana, make a construct token, scry 2, and then whenever. But I mean, it does trigger off of like future. Like you play a second one, the first one gives you the value.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think it could trigger off itself. I think it would be broken
yeah.
or too powerful.
Either way, like I've seen a lot of games with like this synthesizer where there's just like 12 constructs on the battlefield, and I'm like, and watching a mirror match of this, holy shit. I would concede the game even if someone convinced me that I had a winning board position, because I just would not want to play a game where there's like 25 construct tokens on the battlefield between both battlefields. I couldn't do it.
That's fair.
But this single-handedly kind of giving affinity that kind of like oomph back into the format, where we're not doing gimmicky things like turning one of our 7-mana affinity creatures into a Craterhoof Behemoth and winning the game.
For all you modern gamers out there, just a reminder: Dress Down is only a $2 card.
No, stop it. I want to play Kappa Cannoneer when it comes out.
Oh, I can't wait for Captain Cannoneer to come out. Um, Captain Cannoneer is the reason why I'm contemplating buying Simulacrum synthesizer now.
Where same synthesizers at like $1 million a piece.
So the one that I want is the showcase version of it.
Oh yeah,
Would you
that
like
one
to
looks
know
really nice.
the lowest listing of that price is?
$78.
65.80.
Oh, all right, whatever.
Listen, man, I just have to win a couple tournaments and pretend I'm good at Magic, and then I can buy them.
Easy as that. Just get good, as the children say.
Yeah, I mean, it's have to get good, guys. That's all I have to do.
So I mean, simply this one just even though not I would say as widespread as something like Slick Shot Show Off, synthesizer. I mean, Affinity's been a beloved modern archetype for. I mean, depending on who you ask, it's either beloved or behooved, uh, whatever. But yeah, one
It
of those
depends on what
words.
side you're sitting
Yeah,
on. That's honest. Are you casting the artifacts, or are you having to
true.
battle against the horde?
Yeah,
Because if you're battling against the horde, I hate this deck. It's awful. No one should play it. Why is this legal? If you're playing them, this is amazing.
yeah, true.
Those are the two sides of the fence. Are you casting or are you battling against it?
True. That is very true. But I mean, it's been nevertheless an iconic archetype in the modern format, and for a while it was very good, and then some cards got banned, and it kind of sucked. It would show up from time to time, get some cool things, but never really kind of amounted to anything. And synthesizer kind of like skyrocketed this deck, like out of kind of the low tier twos, and kind of put it, I would say, kind of in maybe that tier 1.5. I wouldn't say it's
Yeah.
necessarily a tier 1 deck. Maybe depending on how Cannoneer and the rest of Modern Horizons 3 affects the format. But I mean, if you just gave this card Kappa Cannoneer now, and knowing that it's another thing that triggers like synthesizer and everything, and then it's also going to be a big threat and like the mirrors to just be able to attack through unblocked. I mean, that card's going to be nuts. Like, this deck is going to be pretty damn good, I would say, going forward.
So I have an argument moving forward for why I think that Affinity is going to take over the format in when MH3 comes out, barring what else gets printed into that. But I do think that there will be a solid mono blue, essentially, um Affinity deck. I don't know why I lost my train of thought there. Affinity deck where we're gonna see Affinity playing real counter spells. Essentially, we're gonna see it playing Metallic Rebuke. We're gonna see it playing Force Negation, and it's going to be this threat of a deck that is putting out big creatures along with having counter spells to actually protect them and move forward. And I'm a little scared of Kappa Cannoneer coming to Modern. That card is a huge threat in Legacy, and there's people that actively want that banned in Legacy because of how powerful it is. And I'm not saying that Modern's not powerful. I'm just saying that Legacy definitely has better spells.
Yeah, you definitely need to respect Cannoneer. Like the ping, like Ward 4 on that card. I mean, I talked about one being annoying. Paying
Yeah,
4 mana.
I was gonna say you said you talked about how troublesome paying one is. Paying four might as well just be hexproof. So like, let's just say you have a 1 mana kill spell that kills Kappa Cannoneer. Doesn't matter if it exists or not. Let's just say it does. It now costs 5 mana.
Shoot,
Or I'm
even
well here. Best case scenario, zero cost. Let's just say you're solituding it. It costs 4 mana for solitude,
yeah,
and that's with you also pitching a card. So you are 2 for 1 yourself and tapping 4 mana. That's the best way to kill Kappa Cannoneer, to my knowledge, in Modern right now.
either that. I mean, yeah, like any of the force or elementals that would actually be able to deal with it.
Yeah,
Like as soon
yeah,
as it hits the battlefield,
and any free spell
yeah,
still costs 4 mana.
it ends up being the most annoying permanent on the battlefield, probably besides the synthesizer, because the synthesizer is then just continuing to make this dumb turtle unblockable.
Yeah, so I mean, so like magical Christmas Land, obviously, like we have, you know, synthesizer out, play turtle. Our turtle is a 6/6 immediately because turtle is a 4/4 when it comes out. It sees itself enter the battlefield, so it is a 5/5. You trigger synthesizer, makes it a 6/6.
A 1 mana 6/6, pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's future anticipation or whatever. I mean,
That's
as of
future
right now,
headaches.
yeah. But I mean, as of
Like,
right now, like Simulacrum is, Simulacrum synthesizer is basically holding up the affinity archetype right now, and I mean, doing a pretty good job. Like I said, made it like a kind of a lower like tier two kind of like very niche deck that you would see, and sometimes it would do well. To now, it's just like you need to have a game plan for this. I think you
yes.
need to be able to do something about this because it's going to grow up the ground. So unless you're swinging with like a 2020 flyer, you are probably not winning the game.
Yeah, also notably, this deck does play Shadow Sphere, which is horrendous to play against if you don't have an answer to it. You know, you throw that on one of your uh, constructs that you've made that's, a 5/5, 6/6, 7/7, whatever. It's attacking for a 7/7 trample and lifelink. Like, that's just, it's very hard to win the battle if they're gaining 7 life a turn. It doesn't matter if you have, like, your O10 indestructible creature to block it. They're still gaining 7 a turn to negate your attack that
Mm-hmm.
you're doing. Not to mention whatever creatures they're leaving back to block with.
Just an annoying card. All of it is just annoying.
It
Uh,
is. It's a great deck. Honestly, I'm looking forward to buying into this deck and watching my bank account yell at me.
Hey, there's another card that you got to pick up for that deck too. That thankfully I take notes now before we record, so I can remember certain things.
Yes, this is probably one of my favorite cards that I think a lot of people skipped over or didn't talk about in spoiler season or anything because it's so innocuous. It's just you see it and you moved on. We are of course referring to Lava Spur Boots. It is a 1 mana artifact equipment. Costs 1 to equip. An equipped creature gets +1/+0. Has haste and ward 1.
Oh,
We
there's
just
that
got
word
done
again.
talking. Yeah, we just got done talking about how annoying ward is. So it's only ward 1. It's not ward 4 like Kappa is in the future. Um, but another thing you can get with Urza Saga. So a lot of like the hype around this and a lot of things I've been seeing is what kind of people are talking about. You you're in the mid game, you make your second Urza Saga construct off of in response to the third trigger. You go get lava spur boots. You then clip it to your new token, and now you're attacking with your 2 tokens instead of your 1. Which isn't anything groundbreaking. It's not breaking the game or anything, but instead of attacking for 5, you're now attacking for 10, which is a big deal difference. That is double the damage you were doing. Or instead of attacking for 4, you're attacking for 8. Insert whatever numbers you want to insert there, but you are doubling the damage you were doing.
Oh yeah, and that is kind of like the awkward feeling almost of playing the Urza Saga, where you have 1 token. You're at least when I felt like I played Hammer and tested with some of these other Urza Saga decks, it's like, man, I wish I could just attack with the second creature, and Lava Spur Boots just enables that and makes it that much more kind of annoying to deal with as well.
Yeah, it is. It is annoying.
And it makes your future threats because now you're just going to be able to give them haste, and at least one construct that you create is going to be able to attack the turn that you create it.
Yes, it is. It is crazy. So obviously this is and in comparison to how we talked about how slickshot decks are really cheap and easy to get into, complete opposite here. This is expensive and something that's going to cost you a lot of money to actually get into. So just going off of this is the 11th place deck in the challenge from a couple weeks ago, the 64 Modern Challenge off of Goldfish. It is $505 to buy this deck, according to them.
Which is even that bad compared to like the other decks in the modern format too.
Yeah. Just as a funny too, if you want to look at this. So the 4 Synchron synthesizers are going to cost you $195, so like $200. The 4 Urza Sagas are going to cost you $156, and the 1 Gemstone Cavern in the sideboard is going to cost you $50.
My good God.
So $400 is in 9 cards. You can definitely cut that gemstone cavern. You don't need that in the sideboard. But like, so $500 deck, basically 400 of that is in, you know, Solemn Synthesizers, Urza Saga, and your Shadow Spear at $23.
Sounds like you just don't want us to win, Randy.
I'm just giving people fair warning. We do talk about all levels of decks, whether they're cheap or expensive. Just to keep your eyes out there in case, like, I don't know what your collection sits at. Like, I know for me, I got into Urza Sagas early because I was like, this card's great, it's going to be broken, and I've yet to actually cast in a tournament. It's kind of like my Ragavans. They've just sat there in my binder a lot.
Hey, I mean, in other news, I just found out that I have like basically all of this mana base minus like 2 Spire of Industry, so that's pretty neat.
Oh yeah, the mana base is super cheap outside of the Urza Sagas. I mean, it's playing one Odawara, which is, a $20 card, but I'm not saying that most people own one of those, but most people own one of those.
But I have them. That's the big thing. Uh, anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Tomatoes. Wow, I might. All right, I need to quit looking because then I'm gonna be like I'm just gonna end up building Affinity.
Don't worry, I'll let you know how fun it is.
Wow. All right. All right. So moving on. Lava Spur Boots, cool. Synthesizer,
Yes.
cool. Um, 2 other cards that we kind of set aside as just again playing even smaller roles than kind of like what those cards are doing, but still something worth kind of pointing out and notating, just as kind of where they were going to slot in. So I have a Avon Interrupter as one of the 2, where it's seeing like a play like 1 or 2 copies in Amalia, just as a way that you can counter a spell that isn't necessarily like uncounterable, and basically like the turn you're gonna go off, your opponent plays like the removal spell or whatever, like tries to have that gotcha moment. Well, this is like another thing that you could court for, or you can just straight up like cast and basically get rid of that spell, and you don't care that it goes on. It gets plotted because your opponent's never going to have an opportunity to cast it, or at that point they're not going to be able to actually deal with the Amalia. The damage will be done essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Which it fits in like that role as that 3 mana spirit that I can never remember the name of.
Oh, God damn it.
The one that captures it, Spell Queller.
Spell Queller. Yeah, I was like, I just had that too in my head.
I mean, Spell Queller, it counters like captures the spell that costs 4 or less, and then when it dies, that player can cast that spell without paying its mana cost. But it gets around like uncounterable spells, and Interrupter, in its own way, gets to do the same thing, and it's a lot easier for a deck like Amalia to cast, being double white rather than the white blue on Spell Queller. So, just a neat, interesting thing. It's a cool card. It's from the new set, and it's doing exactly what you'd want it to do, and taking advantage of the fact that plotted cards can only be played as a sorcery on like the next turn. So pretty neat.
Very true. What's your last card there?
3 steps ahead. Seeing play in Modern.
Oh yes, that's right. The blue-white control decks in Modern. I've started playing a couple copies of it. I get why they would play that card as a whole. It's not like amazing, right? Like, so if you read 3 steps ahead, it's 1 blue, and then you can play another generic and then another blue to do a counter spell. So essentially a cancel or counter spell, where you can pay 1 blue plus 3 generic to make a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, and then 1 blue and 2 other to draw 2 cards and discard a card. So what I have to imagine this is really being used for, probably most of the time, is to copy a token as a copy of target artifact or creature you control. So in Modern, we're playing for One Ring in the control decks because it's just the best card drawing spell in Modern. So having another 2 ways to answer your own One Ring, besides, we have Fairy Time Raveler, the other One Rings itself, and then now 3 steps ahead, kind of helps you answer it. Also, just being able to, for 4 mana being able to copy a Solitude or a Subtlety and have that enter the ETB effect, whether it's, countering a creature or planeswalker they're playing, or just outright killing the creature that's on the field already. I see it as just like kind of one of these versatile things where like it's not good at any particular thing it does, but it has the versatility to do all those things.
I think like individually the modes are kind of weak, but you could convince me on casting it for one mode, but if there's ever a time where you get to like counter a spell, like make a copy of your One Ring, or counter spell, draw multiple cards, or draw multiple, whatever, any combination of two or all of those modes end
Yeah.
up being pretty good.
Yep. And it's being played as a 2 of. It's not like, this is a 4 of, we're jamming, like, this is amazing, let's go, type deal. This is, just something that's being played, and it it's a little surprising. I didn't think this card would make it into Modern, to be 100% honest. I don't really think this card is good enough for Pioneer. I'm definitely in a minority in some of that sense. A lot of people like this card a lot. I think it's very, very mediocre. Um, Personally, obviously, I'm not the end all be all on what cards get played, what cards don't get played, but it is just my takeaway. I think it's just kind of it's in there because I think it just helps as another effect to be able to not die to your own One Ring in the games that matters.
Yeah, not doing anything flashy, but like I said, all the modes like individually are just like fine. So when you get to do it
Mhm.
for more, it ends up being pretty good. I tell you what, like watching it in standard, like counter a spell, draw two, discard one, like I was pretty impressed with it. I think I'm convinced that this is probably one of the best counter spells like printed in standard in quite a long time.
That I have no problem believing that in Standard it is amazing.
Right.
I would be almost surprised to find out that it's not good in Standard. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I do think that when you're looking at Modern and Pioneer, I think that it is much worse.
Yeah.
Which is almost funny. I was kind of going through the deck dumps here real quick for Pioneer, and I found so far one blue white control deck that's playing the Three Steps Ahead card.
See, I could just see it seeing play for the fact that it is just such a, whatever, like late game, this counters a spell and it cantrips.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
It's just one of those funny things where like it's seeing more play. It's like those funny things where like one card seeing more play in a different format, but like it's a higher power level format, but somehow Three Steps Ahead seeing more play there than it is in Pioneer, where you think it would be better because it's a lower format, like a lower power format.
mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same way as like we see uh crap, what's the card that's banned in Pioneer but not Modern?
Expressive iteration.
Underworld Breach is
Oh
the
yeah.
one where it's kind of funny where like Underworld Breach is banned in Pioneer, but is perfectly legal in Modern, but then also banned in Legacy.
Oh yeah. And
And
it's
it's
just
just
mid. It's mid and modern.
yeah, it's like mid and modern. It's like one of these weird like it's just the same way as like with this Three Steps Ahead. Like it's seeing play in modern, it's seeing very fringe play in Pioneer. And it's just like one of these funny things when this happens. It's always something I like to see, or something I think is funny to see when something like this happens.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can get behind that. Was there any other outlaw cards that you wanted to talk about, or did we hit
Um,
most of them?
There's the Waste Not deck is playing Kavar. What is it? I saw it
Karavik?
was Karavik. Thank you. Yeah, Karavik, the Punisher. They're pulling around with some copies. It's not like a mainstay at all, but I have seen that card kind of keep popping up
All right, that's an
from.
interesting one.
Yeah, I've seen it as like a 2 of and a 1 of in some list. I don't think this is anything groundbreaking or crazy. It makes sense. I mean, your entire deck is black, so you don't have a drawback to when because he has whenever you commit a crime, exile up to one target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You may now cast the copy. You do lose 2 life, so obviously you still have to pay for that copy. So like it's not broken or anything like that, but it is an interesting way to like rebuy like a Shieldred or like a Liliana or a Waste Not. being able to rebuy your removal spells, things like that. Just kind of a cool little thing. And like this deck obviously commits crimes without trying because it plays removal and discard spells.
Yeah, I mean, I could
It's
definitely
almost a,
go
it's
ahead.
almost impossible for them not to go a turn cycle without committing a crime.
I mean, could you like? I can imagine like a world where you cast like Karavak, whatever, and then like turn 4, it's like go blank to like make you discard 2 cards, and then getting to flashback a Thoughtseize from your graveyard, like you lose 4 life, but your opponent's down like 3 cards, and you basically spent one.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty
Just
pretty good.
yeah, it seems good. It seems playable. I don't think this is like again, it's not like groundbreaking. This isn't going to put um, you know, waste not into like tier 0 and just like we can't beat this deck. We got to ban something. It's
Hmm.
nothing crazy, but it puts the deck back on. It gives the deck an extra little edge.
Yeah, yeah. I can see that. It's definitely like if you don't answer me, then I'm like you're kind of SOL. Like your hands is going to be absolutely torn to shreds.
Yeah, I like it as just another answer, another threat for this deck essentially. So I do think that's probably the biggest problem with this deck is like the lack of threats essentially.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem, ain't it?
Yeah, I do like the deck though. I think it's a relatively decent deck, and it's honestly not too expensive if it wasn't for Shieldred.
Reprint Shieldred cowards.
Please just reprint it into Oblivion, make her a common and reprint her.
Do you think that Bethesda would print Shieldred into Oblivion?
Uh, maybe.
Come on, Randy, catch it.
I don't know this joke. I'm
It's because
sorry.
Bethesda made the game Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Oh, goddamn it did.
So like, I don't
I
know if
knew.
it get printed in Oblivion, but or yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I forgot that game exists. I'm not gonna lie.
You also said that you lost your train of thought earlier, which kind of makes sense because we were talking about Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Oko probably just stole the train.
Probably.
Yeah, see?
Bastard.
Yeah. I might be like tier 4 at Magic, but I'm tier 1 with the dad jokes.
Yeah.
But, that's, you know,
I chose this.
that's kind of the early impact of the Outlaws of Thunder Junction, on like the broad scale of, standard and everything. We're seeing, some I would say some pretty impactful cards coming from like the standard legal set, especially since now that modern has a set dedicated to printing cards directly into it. The fact that we are still seeing some modern power level cards that are seeing, a decent amount of play or at least getting looked at for that format, I would say is pretty good for a standard legal set. Of course, Pioneer like literally spawning multiple different decks around like one card as well. I would count as a win.
Yeah, anytime that a standard set puts cards into the format and changes things, I'm always happy with. Um I'm always happy. Sorry, my computer wanted to remind me that Windows 11 existed for some reason.
I don't know. You just
No matter
sound
how.
elated. You sound elated to talk about Outlaws of Thunder Junction.
It was it caught me off guard. I had a whole pop up behind me. I was like, what is this? What did I click on? I was like, nope, just Windows 11 reminding me that it exists, despite me trying my best not to remember it exists. But no, there was one other card I wanted to talk about
Okay.
with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I don't know why I forgot this card because it's probably my favorite card from the set.
Oh no, I'm
Uh,
curious.
it's the Giraffe,
Oh yeah, Gerald.
Gerald. He started to make his own deck that was basically what I said would happen with the blue white deck that we saw in standard, where you were buying back and bringing back uh the
Like
Jin,
Monastery Mentor and
yeah, Monastery Mitra and the blue Jin. that was an X4 equal to your instance of sorceries in your graveyard.
Okay.
Power, which equal to your instance. Well, now we have, Geralf, the Flesh Right, and Monastery Mentor as well. So, we have two essentially um, creatures that care about casting spells. Because Geralf has 2 in a blue for a 2/3. He's a legendary creature. Whenever you cast a spell during your turn, other than your first spell that turn, you create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue token creature, and then whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter for each other zombie that enters the battlefield under your control this turn. Um, so just another thing that rewards you for casting multiple spells. Same thing as how Monster Mentor does, where it's a prowess 2/2 creature for 2 and a white, and then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to make a 1/1 monk that also has prowess. Um, so just kind of like this blue-white ringy animator shell we've seen, which kind of plays the same way as Phoenix, but doesn't rely so much on its graveyard in the sense of like if someone goes turn 2 and casts like Rest in Peace against you, you can just cast your 3 mana spells. Like that's not too terrible. It's not like where you want to be at, but it's not too terrible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And to be honest, I guess even kind of thinking about it now, it's kind of funny how I think in a way they kind of fight with each other because you obviously, if you have 7 spells, you don't want to cast all 7 of them with, in theory, all 7 with Monastery Mentor because yeah, you make 7 tokens, but then it's just like a bunch of 1/1s and a 2/2,
Mm-hmm.
where like you want to kind of figure out like do I make 3 tokens and then I make them all really big, or do I make a ton of tokens? And Geralf's just like, yeah, just give me all the spells because like I'm gonna make these things just naturally bigger anyway the more spells that you end up casting. So pretty neat that they
Exactly.
can work together.
Mhm. And it's really cool that we have like this kind of reanimator deck here in Pioneer. It's not doing anything amazing. I know it has. I know I've seen a couple streamers play it. I know it probably put up some amount of numbers. It's not like doing anything broken or anything like that. But it is kind of cool to see that we have like a reanimator style deck in Pioneer now.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. Like I'll look at it, but I ain't gonna be happy about it.
Yeah, it's something I'm probably gonna eventually play a little bit of. I think that you could win an RCQ with it. I don't think it's something that, like, if you play it in an RCQ, you're going to get laughed out at, or people are going to go, wow, I can't believe someone thought to bring this, shitty deck. But I do think that it's still early in its testing, and it probably needs a lot of, like, someone needs to actually work on it and make this deck good.
Yeah, we're all too busy working with a bird wizard instead of some nerd playing with dead people.
Well, yeah, I thought it was funny because I played against, the tunneling cat. He was playing that deck, and I was just almost ecstatic because I had said early on that this deck was going to be a thing, and it was really fun to see someone playing that deck. And then I ultimately crushed him with Bird Wizards. So it was a little disheartening at the same time. I was rooting for my opponent a lot to win that game.
As I'm staring at 17 damage in hand and 32 on board.
It was really disheartening because I kept a like shaky one lander and then still was able to win relatively easy. um, just because I was able to like throw burn at my opponent's face. I didn't find my second land until like turn 3, turn 4, and it just wasn't close because the bird wizard's good.
Get wrecked, nerds.
It turns out that having flying against the deck that's trying to come up the board on the ground is really good.
You know what? You're not wrong.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's you got like 4 creatures on the board. That's great. A call.
Oh man.
But
Oh,
that's all I have for the Thunder Junction or what it is starting to do to the formats outside of standard.
that's a good. That's a good. Yeah, yeah. I'm good with that. Outlaws is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I like it. I can't wait to see what people come up with next. Um, what I eventually sit down and try to brew with as well. See if I can make Oko playable.
Hey, play standard. Like that's definitely a possibility.
Um, I will say Oko is really good at limited, especially when you get to steal your opponent's Oko.
That is true.
Oh, so good, so powerful.
Opening up your own Oko is fine, but stealing someone else, you know, taking their Oko that they opened up is pretty good too.
Yeah.
Well, alrighty, I suppose that is the end of episode 11 of the Casual Spikes podcast. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Of course, if you did, please leave a like on this video. Comment down below anything that you want to talk about from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, anything we talked about in this episode, or any questions, comments, concerns that you have. You know, always looking to improve, kind of like what we have going on here. And just in general, I like hearing from the people.
That's nice. That's nice hearing from the people, learning what they want to say, what they want to tell us, what we're doing wrong, things like that.
Oh, yeah. We're obviously clearly not doing anything wrong.
Well, no, I'm perfect. I've already established this.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to be do nothing wrong and play Magic perfectly as us two Chads, if you will. I can't even say that with a straight face. If you want to
sit here talking about the Pro Tour we weren't in.
If any of y'all want to support our content or anything like that, you know, you just subscribe to this channel here. If you want to support Randy, I'll have his channel linked in the description down below as well, so you can check out his content and everything. Subscribe to him, ring the notification bell, so you know when either of us post videos on our respective channel. And yeah, be sure to tune back in on most Saturdays to hear us talk about Modern, Pioneer, what's going on, the metagame, things like that. You know, some useful tips and tricks as well to kind of help crush your next RCQ, RC, or maybe even Pro Tour. Who knows? We could get to that point.
Yeah, we just have to get to the Pro Tour first.
Yeah, we have to in ourselves be good too. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, I've been able to get to the RC. I just can't get past the RC. Okay.
Hey, I haven't made it past the qualifier part, so we're good. We're good.
Well, how we know we're perfect.
All right, everyone. That's a wrap. Hope to see y'all next week. We'll find some stuff out.
Yes.
We'll figure it out. But you know, have a good night, good morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and hope to see you all in the next video or in the next podcast.